Hey everyone, welcome to the show.
Great to be diving in again.
So picture this. Two women, empresses really, living these incredibly grand lives, but under this constant microscope, everything they did, watched.
Elisabeth of Austria and Eugénie of France.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge figures. And their stories, well, they're packed with dazzling highs, but also some really crushing lows. It's quite something.
Absolutely. And today we're getting into that through the lens of biography and history, specifically Nancy Goldstone's book, The Rebel Empresses.
It was a really compelling read.
It is. Goldstone gives you this amazing window into Empress Elisabeth Sisi, and Empress Eugénie, and the research is just so thorough. You see these moments where their lives kind of intersect.
Yeah. And you understand the shared pressures they faced. Imperial life, the public eye, and the personal tragedies too. Big ones.
Definitely. What I really loved reading it was how Goldstone brings them to life. You get their strengths, sure, but also their vulnerabilities. It feels very human.
Right. And it's not just personal stories in a vacuum.
Yeah.
She does a great job placing them within that whole sweep of European politics at the time. You see the bigger picture.
Exactly. And another thing, the parallels between them.
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily expect it, right? Different backgrounds, different empires.
But the challenges they faced, surprisingly similar sometimes.
Yeah, the book really draws those connections out well. It gives you a unique angle on them.
Now, one thing maybe, not a criticism exactly, but something to be aware of.
Go on.
Sometimes the amount of historical detail,
Yeah.
it can feel a little dense,
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Goldstone definitely did her homework. It's packed.
But like you said, it does enrich the story in the end. It gives you that full context.
Totally agree. So overall rating.
I'd give it a solid 4 out of 5 stars. Really strong.
Yeah, me too. Definitely a 4.
Okay, so let's dive in a bit. The book kicks off with this really specific scene, doesn't it? August 1867, Salzburg Station.
Ah, yes, the big meeting. Elisabeth of Austria, Eugénie of France. Wives of these two major emperors meeting. And what's immediately striking is how everyone, the public, the press, they basically treated it like a beauty pageant.
It's incredible, isn't it? There were serious political talks happening, huge European powers meeting, but the main fascination, who looked better?
It just shows you the kind of scrutiny they were under, so intense and often so superficial.
They even had a life-size statue of Sisi there, in the waiting room, decked out with flowers.
Talk about home field advantage, right. And the press covers, like you said, all about appearance. The Daily Telegraph guy.
Oh yeah, noting Sisi was taller, slender, and that rather mean comment about Eugénie looking stout of late. Ouch.
It's quite something reading that kind of personal commentary passed off as news, and they were annoyed Eugénie wore a veil at first, couldn't immediately judge her looks.
But quick to praise Elizabeth's spirited, refined countenance. You just feel the pressure cooker they lived in, always having to look perfect.
Exactly, like their main job was just to be decorative. But the book, thankfully, goes way beyond that. It looks at where they came from, how they ended up in these positions. Let's start with Elisabeth, with Sisi, her father, Duke Max in Bavaria. He sounds, well, unconventional.
Oh, completely. Goldstone paints him as almost operatic, doesn't she? Handsome, loves sports, music. A real character.
Yeah, and desperate to escape the eternal uniformity of an everyday life, as he put it.
That quote says it all, really.
Yeah.
And him taking off for Egypt for 8 months, just weeks after Sisi was born, with a huge entourage.
Yeah, it gives you a sense straight away that her childhood probably wasn't your standard stuffy royal upbringing.
And it wasn't. Her mother, Ludovica, had a very different path. Her own marriage prospects were sort of sacrificed for family politics, weren't they?
Right, she was meant for the Crown Prince of Portugal, but her mother thought Lisbon was too far, the prince unsuitable. So she ends up married to her cousin, Duke Max.
A man she was apparently indifferent to. And she even lost her title, Princess of Bavaria. You can imagine there might have been some resentment there.
Sounds incredibly frustrating, but despite their own issues, it seems they didn't let it poison the kids' childhoods.
Apparently not. Goldstone says Sisi had a really happy, almost idyllic childhood. Big family, lots of life. That probably shaped her quite a bit.
Definitely. And Duke Max, despite his travels, took his procreation duties seriously.
Seems like it. A baby every couple of years. Sisi had loads of siblings by the time she was 7. That close, lively family must have fostered her independence.
Okay, now let's switch to Eugénie. Her father, Don Cipriano, Count of Teba, also quite a history there, lost an arm at Trafalgar.
Yeah, and got tangled up in all that Spanish political turmoil. Power struggles between King Carlos and his son Ferdinand. ended up arrested.
So Eugenie's early life had this undercurrent of instability right from the start.
Absolutely. And it sounds like her mother, Maria Manuela, was the real powerhouse navigating all that.
Appealing directly to Don Cipriano's brother to get him out of prison, that takes guts.
She seems incredibly resourceful, moved the family strategically, inherited money, ended up in Paris. Her social skills and connections were clearly key.
And brought her into contact with people like Prosper Mérimée, the writer.
Right, who was apparently totally charmed by her and became a family friend, even played games with young Eugenie. Little details like that.
They really help you connect, don't they? But for both women, becoming empresses, that was the huge turning point. And maybe neither was fully prepared. Sisi's marriage to Franz Joseph sounds like a whirlwind.
Especially since she wasn't the one he was supposed to be marrying.
Right. It was meant to be her older sister, Helene, Nene. Ludovica brought them both, hoping the emperor would choose Helene.
And Helene seemed, on paper, the more obvious choice. Older, poised, more royal. Even Franz Joseph's tough mother, Archduchess Sophia, approved of her conversation skills.
Looked like it was all set.
But nope. Franz Joseph sees Elizabeth, and bam, instantly smitten. One day, one carriage ride.
And he just announces, I'm marrying Elizabeth. Imagine the shock.
Totally. And Sisi's reaction is so telling, isn't it? When her mother told her, she apparently said something like, "But how can he think of me? I'm so insignificant."
It really shows her youth, maybe a lack of self-awareness about the impression she made.
Definitely. And while the wedding news made headlines, Goldstone points out it wasn't actually the biggest news out of Austria then.
No, that was the emperor's upcoming meeting with the Tsar. Politics always simmering in the background.
Always. So while Franz Joseph is falling in love, there are these huge international stakes. And the prep for Sisi becoming empress sounds intense.
Especially with Archduchess Sophia overseeing things. She knew Elizabeth wasn't trained for the role.
Not at all. Wedding date set fast, but then it was all about rigorous training, this enormous trousseau. Even Elizabeth's teeth needed attention, apparently.
The pressure to fit the Habsburg mold must have been immense. Yellow teeth, wow.
Right. Now, Eugenie's path to empress, quite different, not a prearranged royal match.
No, she married Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who became Emperor Napoleon III after, well, a lot of political maneuvering.
And her family's move to Paris, her mother's connections, that put her right in the center of French high society. She became a real figure, admired for her beauty, fashion, spirit.
But the courtship with Louis Napoleon wasn't straightforward, was it? He had a bit of a reputation.
A bit, yeah, known ladies' man. There was even that rumor he was initially after Eugenie just to get closer to her sister.
Which led to that awful incident. Eugenie thinking he liked her, finding out it was her sister, and then...
taking poison. In despair. It's a shocking story.
Yeah.
Shows the intense emotions even before she became empress.
A really stark reminder of vulnerability. But eventually he did propose. They married in 1853. Big turning point for France and for her.
And notice the timing again. Just like Sisi's wedding happened amid political tension, Eugenie's marriage came as Louis Napoleon was cementing his power as the new emperor.
Some saw the marriage as strategic, right? To soften his image, maybe?
Goldstone suggests that, yeah, show a more personable side. And those early years of their reign seemed full of optimism. Big plans for France.
Railway expansion, the Exposition Universelle planning, trying to rival London's Great Exhibition.
And the huge modernization of Paris under Baron Haussmann, starting then too. New boulevards, sewers, markets, a real sense of progress, establishing France as a modern power.
But Eugenie's early years as empress, also marked by personal tragedy, that miscarriage.
Yes, relatively early on, a huge emotional blow, adding to the pressure she was already under.
That letter she wrote to her sister, Paca. It's heartbreaking. You feel her longing for an heir, but also her fear, thinking about Louis VII, Marie Antoinette.
It reveals those deep anxieties beneath the surface of imperial life.
It's just fascinating seeing these parallels and contrasts, both thrust into these demanding roles, complex politics, public scrutiny, and dealing with personal joy and sorrow.
And for both, their mothers-in-law played such a huge role, especially Archduchess Sophia for Sisi. What a presence.
Formidable is the word. Sophia had basically engineered Franz Joseph's succession, and she had very firm ideas about how things should be done, how an empress should act.
And she clearly had huge influence over Franz Joseph, and definitely over the young Elizabeth initially. You can just feel the tension brewing.
Yeah, the book mentions Sisi hugging cousins at her wedding, and Sophia immediately shuts it down. breach of protocol.
Even the wedding night sounds incredibly stiff and controlled, orchestrated by Sophia.
It paints this picture of a super rigid court. And Sisi, with her freer Bavarian background, she must have chafed against it constantly.
That honeymoon at Luxembourg sounds anything but romantic. Constantly watched, judged by Sophia, even minor things becoming affairs of state.
She ended up going on long rides with Franz Joseph just to escape, apparently, or hiding in her rooms with her parrots on rainy days, writing letters home, so isolated.
You really feel for her. Now, Eugénie, she didn't have quite the same domineering mother-in-law figure.
No, but she had other challenges as an outsider. Dealing with snobbery from some of the established Bonaparte family, right, because she wasn't royalty by birth.
Exactly, that was a key difference.
Yeah.
But the pressure to produce an heir, that was intense for both of them.
And for Eugénie, that early miscarriage just made it worse. It wasn't until after that trip to London and getting advice from Queen Victoria herself
That she finally conceived successfully. The birth of the Prince Imperial in 1856. Huge relief and celebration in France.
secured the succession. Massive moment for them.
And similarly, the pressure on Sisi for an heir in Austria was immense. And the dynamic with Sophia over the children, that became a real battleground.
Oh, absolutely. When her first daughters, Sophie and Gisela, were born, Sophia just took over their upbringing. Believed Sisi wasn't capable.
Imagine, Elizabeth must have been furious, resentful, wanting a say in her own kids' lives.
Which led to conflict, like when Elizabeth insisted on taking little Sophie to Italy for her health, against Sophia's wishes.
That was a bold move, pushing back directly.
And crucially, Franz Joseph actually sided with Elizabeth on that one.
Which was huge, a real turning point, showing Elizabeth she could sometimes challenge Sophia's authority. A small victory, but significant.
So both women, in their different ways, found strategies to navigate these constraints, sometimes conforming, sometimes rebelling, subtly or not so subtly.
And they both grew into influential figures beyond just being wives and mothers. But their lives remained tangled up with political upheaval and, sadly, more tragedy.
Yeah, that rise of nationalism across Europe, shifting alliances, it made things increasingly volatile for both empires.
Definitely. Napoleon III wanted to reassert French power, which led to involvement in the Crimean War, the war in Italy.
Which brought glory, yes, but also cost a lot, financially and in lives. And it stirred up tensions with other powers.
And that Italian war directly hit Austria, too. Franz Joseph lost Lombardy and Venetia. Big defeat, fueling internal dissent in the Habsburg Empire.
And it's fascinating how both women got drawn into these politics, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not. Eugénie had strong opinions.
And tried to influence Napoleon III, though maybe not always subtly. That incident where she tried to suggest Archduke Maximilian for the Spanish throne.
Huh. Yeah, apparently baffling the Austrian ambassador. A bit clumsy, maybe.
But it shows she was engaged. Elizabeth, though, found her cause more with Hungary, didn't she?
Yes, she played a really key role in the compromise that created the dual Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Her empathy for Hungarians, learning the language, it made her hugely popular there. After years of tension, that trip she and Franz Joseph took to Pest.
They were greeted with such enthusiasm. Her presence was seen as crucial in healing that rift.
It really is remarkable. Both women, initially valued for beauty and airs, carved out real influence. But that thread of tragedy, it keeps running through. Maximilian in Mexico is just heartbreaking.
Franz Joseph's brother accepting that doomed title, Emperor of Mexico.
And the French intervention, pushed by Napoleon III and Eugénie. It was a total disaster. Maximilian ended up captured and executed.
A devastating blow for both the French and Austrian imperial families. Shows the danger of these ambitions.
And for Eugénie, who'd championed the Mexican venture, it must have been personally shattering. You read about Charlotte's letters, Maximilian's wife going from hopeful to just despair.
That failure in Mexico was just one challenge. Then came the rise of Prussia under Bismarck, a huge threat to both Austria and France.
Leading to the Austro-Prussian War and then the big one, the Franco-Prussian War.
Which was catastrophic for France. The end of the Second Empire, exile for Napoleon III and Eugénie, happened so fast.
Yeah, Bismarck's manipulation of that M's telegram, masterful in a dark way. And Eugénie acting as regent while Napoleon III is at the front.
She was basically ignored by her own government.
Yeah.
And then the French army just collapsed. Napoleon III captured at Sedan.
The news hitting Paris. Revolt, the Third Republic proclaimed. Eugénie had to flee the Tuileries Palace.
That scene Goldstone describes, escaping with just one lady in waiting, recognized by a kid in the street, bundled into a carriage, the end of an era, just like that.
So dramatic. And Elizabeth, Her own huge personal tragedy came later, with Crown Prince Rudolph.
Her only son, his suicide at Mayerling. The grief must have been unbearable, compounded by the public scrutiny, the hostility she faced in Austria afterwards.
And that official verdict of temporary derangement,
Yeah.
echoing the rumors around King Ludwig II's suicide earlier, haunting her with this fear she'd passed on some insanity. Her isolation then sounds profound.
Both women lost their sons, unimaginable pain. Eugenie's son, the Prince Imperial, died years later too, fighting for the British in South Africa.
Tragic echoes. But despite everything, the fall of empires, the personal losses, both women lived long lives afterwards.
Eugenie in exile in England, still a respected figure in royal circles.
And Elizabeth, becoming more withdrawn, eccentric maybe, but still traveling, still fascinating the public, right up until her assassination in Geneva in 1898.
A shocking end.
It really is. A poignant finish to a life of such contrasts.
Yeah.
Goldstone mentions how even late in life, Eugenie would visit a memorial to Elizabeth, a silent nod to that connection they shared.
Wow. Just incredible lives. So if this glimpse has intrigued you, you really should pick up Nancy Goldstone's The Rebel Empresses to get the full, rich story.
Absolutely. We've put an Amazon link down in the description for you. Make it easy.
And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please do give us a like and definitely subscribe so you don't miss our future explorations. We really appreciate it.
We do. Thank you so much for joining us today as we just scratched the surface of this amazing historical account.
We genuinely love to hear what stood out most to you about Elizabeth and Eugenie. Was there a particular moment? Or maybe you have questions.
Yeah, drop your thoughts, your favorite bits, any questions in the comments below. We love reading them and hearing what you think.
Your engagement really makes this worthwhile. So, until next time.
Until next time, thanks for listening.